Things. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Troy Hudkins, and this is Lessons for Life podcast. And today I have a guest, Kerry Greenly, joining us. Good friend from a long time, cousin, relation. Kerry, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Troy. I hope you're feeling the same.
Things are going well. Couldn't be better. Kerry, to start with, who is Kerry Greenly?
Well, I'm now in my 60s, so I'm a kid who grew up in a small town and wanted to experience life as much as I could. And as I grew and went through school, I began to find ways to get out and see what life has to offer. So took a bit of a meandering route to get there. Uh, Kerry Greenly's been married 3 times. He's lived in 9 different cities in Canada, traveled extensively, adopted 2 children, one from China, one from Vietnam, um, and just thoroughly enjoyed life so far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Who do you think in your life was your biggest influence growing up?
Well, I wouldn't say growing up. Uh, the biggest influence I had that I would credit in my life was a gentleman I met in my late 30s. I was working at a radio station in Hamilton, Ontario. I had owned I've owned 3 businesses um, in my career, and I had bought a bar restaurant, thinking at 33 I had it all figured out, and at 36 years old I realized that wasn't for me. And so the general manager of that radio station, his name was Wolfgang von Reisfeld, and Wolf and I just hit it off. And he's a born leader and a born mentor. I was fortunate enough that he took time and saw something in me, and I learned so much from him. And so he was probably the biggest influence in my life. And I went from, just to give the people watching this, uh, I, I took the lessons he taught me and combined with some other things that I'd learned from reading. And within 5 or 6 years after meeting him, my financial situation had improved so much. I was making well over 6 figures a year, and
Nice.
by the time I was 40 years old.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Did he have more influence on your professional life or your personal life, or like
Both.
your businesses?
Uh, Not so much my businesses. He had a tremendous effect on both my personal and my professional life. His big thing, which I adopted, was basically, to sum it up in one word, was the Japanese word kaizen, which is you try to improve every day. So he would want you to improve both professionally and personally. And so if you went in, he just had a real knack of, if you're managing, they tell you that, know when to lead, know when to step back, and know when to get out of the way. So knowing when to get out of the way means if you come to me with a question, I throw it back at you to let you figure it out because I know that you can't. Like lots of leaders or managers or parents will try to figure things out. And so that way you develop yourself. But there are times when you have to lead somebody and say, okay, here's how you do it. But there's other times when you just ask some questions and get them to discover how to do it. And he was a master at that.
Nice.
Still is. We're still very good friends, by the way.
Nice. Right on. Well, it's kind of like your kids come to you and ask you for your advice, and they don't really want your advice. They want you to give them some extra tools so they can figure out what they're wanting.
Yeah, lots of times when kids come to you, they will ask you for, if they ask you for advice, they're asking you for one, validation. Dad, I'm doing this. What do you think? They want you to validate it.
Right.
Two, they're looking for praise.
Yep.
And three, and three, they actually do want an answer. Now, probably the first two are 90% of the time, and the last one is 10% of the time.
Right.
So lots of times, like with kids, if and we all make mistakes. I made plenty of them. If we can figure that out, then your kids, you have to know when to step back from your kids, because any parent knows the hardest thing is to step back and let them struggle.
Oh yeah.
Because if they don't struggle, they never figure it out.
Right. You have to fail to get to learn. Right.
Absolutely. And that was another thing that I learned from a few people. You have to look at, lots of people will look at failure and they'll say, oh, I didn't like that feeling. I'm never going to try that again. Well,
Right. Right.
you need to fail, because you're exactly right. If you fail, that's just another thing that didn't work until you find the thing that does work.
Right.
And as long as you learn from your mistakes, one of the things that Wolf taught me, once is a mistake, twice is a habit.
Right.
So if you don't learn from your mistake the first time, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we know what Einstein said about that, then it becomes a habit. By the
Right.
way, there's a great book, if somebody's watching this, called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. One of the best books I've ever read.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, there's a quote that I can't remember who it was, Zig Ziglar maybe, that said, if you don't change what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got.
Absolutely. That's a complete truth.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it's Zig Ziglar. Forgive me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but that there's a quote out there similar to that talks about that.
Well, here's the rule about quotes very quickly for anybody that's watching. The first time, if you're up in front of an audience, and I've done this because I've spoken to audiences, the first thing you do is you say, I'll say, Zig Ziglar said, and I quote him. Then the next time you use the quote, you say, this is an anonymous quote. And then the third time you say, here's what I say.
Yeah. Right. So then you're not digging yourself in the hole.
Absolutely. So sorry, you were going to ask something.
So with Wolf, you met him at your radio station in Hamilton?
Yes, I was about, sorry, go ahead.
Did you met him there and that's where you learned from him? Or did you just kind of grow into that?
No, that's where I learned from him. So let me back up. That was probably about 8 years into my career. I started, to give you a quick synopsis, for those when I said I worked in lots of places, I started in a very small town in southern Alberta with my radio career. From there, I had gone to college. From there, I moved to Lethbridge, Alberta, and was there for about 3 years. I was doing extremely well, but always I wanted to work in larger cities, and my goal was to work in either Toronto or Vancouver, because those are the two largest markets in the country. And so in right around 1980, I had a call from Toronto, and I picked up my wife at the time, and at 27 years old, I moved from Lethbridge, Alberta, and rented a condo in downtown Toronto. Like, 2 blocks from Bloor and Yonge, for anybody that's been in Toronto, which was is considered the center of Toronto. Well, a little bit of a culture shock. And when I was there, then that job didn't materialize. So I wound up going to the city of Brantford, Ontario, which was about an hour and a half west of Toronto. And I was on the air at that time, and I then my first of my 3 marriages fell apart. This one is I'm in for life, but the first, and so I then so in Brantford here I'm flat broke. I'm working on the air. I'm making a pittance of money. People on air, unless you're the morning man, don't make a lot of money in broadcasting. And I was offered a job to be a disc jockey. I was in the news department, but I could spin tunes in a bar on Saturday night and get paid cash, $40. That time that was a lot of money. That's back, and it wasn't big, but that's back in about 1989. About 1983, 82. So I said to my guy at the time, I said, my news director, I said, can I get Saturday nights off? Because I was working the Saturday night shift. And he came back to me and said, well, Kerry, can't do it. And I thought to myself, okay, I am making, I don't know what it was, $1,000, $1,100 a month or something, like barely above poverty. And I was getting tired of craft dinner. And the second thing was, the second thing was, I thought, you know what, you're 28 and a half, 29 years old. You don't want to be 45 and be an old disc jockey, an old newsman in a small market, because you've got zero skills. So I thought, oh, what should I do? And I had paid my way through college selling clothes. And I thought, you know what, I'll try sales. So I put a suit on. I went down to the sales manager, and I'd been told very early on in my career I should be in sales. And I thought, no, I'm the next Wolfman Jack. I'm gonna, and went down, and so the guy hired me. And then I never looked back. And so I was in Brantford. I was doing extremely well. I bought myself a boat, and I was boating on Lake Erie, and I was driving an IROC Z, and I bought a building with 5 apartments in it. So I'm doing pretty good. So I'm about 32, 33. I'm thinking, oh, you're pretty smart, which that's your first mistake, right? And so I'm walking through a mall in Brantford one day, and my contact at the mall, which I looked after, said, hey, we just closed this restaurant for non-payment. We'll sell it to you. And I'd always wanted to own a bar because I always DJ'd in them. So then, well, I DJ'd bars, I could do this. So I bought the bar. Well, 3 years later, Troy, I was working like 14, 15 hours a day. I was mopping floors at 2 a.m. because I couldn't afford to pay anybody to do it. And I thought, this isn't for me. Sounds really good on the outside, but listen, when people say, I want to own my own business because I want to work for myself, no. You're working for the utility company. You're working for the tax man. You're working for the electric guy. You're working for the food guy, Anyway,
Yeah.
so I got back. I got rid of the bar, and they were looking for, I heard that CKOC Radio in Hamilton was looking for a salesperson. So I phoned, and they said, here's the guy to talk to, who was the general manager. So I called the top, the general manager, rather than the sales manager. And that's how I met Wolf. He was the GM.
Okay.
And he came to the sales manager and said, here, you should talk to this guy. And I got, I was hired, and I was there for about a year. So that was about halfway through. less than halfway through. And while I was there, things were doing pretty good. And I was then, some of the guys I'd worked with, I was then offered a position in Toronto, which I'd always wanted to go to. But also there was another position in Kitchener-Waterloo. And the radio station in Kitchener-Waterloo, whom I had tried to talk to about 3 years before, was dominant in the market. And for those of you who don't know Southern Ontario, Kitchener-Waterloo is probably one of the most progressive cities in Canada. Very, very hardworking people. Not that there isn't in other cities, but it's just progressive. And the stations, the two radio stations there were very were the top two stations. There was 4 stations here. They were the top 2 stations. And the country station also carried the Toronto Blue Jays. And this was right around 1991. So the Jays were winning, which meant that I could sell the Jays. Plus, because we had an affiliation, suddenly, I had gone to Jays games, but suddenly I had a real into tickets. And I've always been a sports fan. So hello. And then we were going to pick up the Leafs, which don't shut off the podcast, but I'm an old Leafs fan. And so I thought, so I decided to go there instead of to the station in Toronto. And that's where things took off. And at the same time, Troy, I was doing different things I picked up from Wolf. And then I also used to see speakers every week. There was at that time an incentive, I guess, called the Power Within. So you could join and go to see people like Robin Sharma and Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and like Zig Ziglar, all of these like multi-millionaires. I went and saw Nito Cobain, who was a multi-millionaire, and they would tell you, how they did things. And, so I learned different things from them. And I learned, Brian Tracy said, if you read one book every month, that might be 10 minutes a day. You think you'd be smarter in 1 year than you are today? And I thought, well, obviously.
Yeah.
And then he said, what you are making right now is what you think you're worth. So I was doing pretty good. And I saw Jim Rohn shortly after that. And Jim Rohn said, and I'll never forget this line, Troy, Jim Rohn said, listen, I've done pretty well in life. I have a few $1 million. But he said, do you know what we do? He said, my millionaire and I buddies, every once in a while, we go see a billionaire. Because the billionaire says to us, hey, listen, you're doing okay, but.
Right? Yeah.
So yeah. I thought, okay. So anyway, so back to Brian Tracy, he said, write down on a piece of paper what you feel you're worth a year, what you feel you should make a year. So I thought about it, and I wrote down $100,000. I think that was in about 94. And that year, my T4, well, I'll share it with you. My T4 said about 108 grand.
Nice.
That was a lot of money then.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to say, hey, look at me. I mean, I was a kid who grew up in a small town with a father who a stepdad who, really enjoyed his beer, and a mom who had, 5 kids, 6 counting him, so like that to me, that was pretty big stuff. So anyway, you'd asked about Wolf. So to get back there, so Rogers purchased those radio stations. That's when I went to work for Rogers Communications, which is an amazing company, by the way. And they had bought a company called McLean Hunter, which was a 125-year-old company in the country. And when they did that, they changed general managers. So just before that, McLean Hunter was still there, and McLean Hunter had changed the GM. I'm sorry. And so I went to the president of McLean Hunter Radio, we were talking, and he said, I said, I don't know why you're taking so long to hire a general manager when the best GM in Canada is just down the road in Hamilton and he's available. And he said to me, why do you think he's available? I said, well, because the stations in Hamilton had just been bought and the guy that bought them was a hands-on guy. So I said, if you're a hands-on guy, you don't need a GM.
Right.
And so a week later, the president, his name was Hal Blackenhar, Hal introduced Wolf as a new general manager in Kitchener. So Wolf and I laugh about this. So I went up to him and he'd been talking to him for 3 months. I guess they were negotiating. And I just went up there and said, look, I recommend you for this job. I said, don't disappoint me. So we laugh about that. But then
Nice.
he mentored me there as well.
Nice.
And just to carry it a little bit further, and then please ask another question. So I was doing really well in Kitchener, and I was enjoying the city, and we flew to China, which is another story you can ask me about, with my second wife, and we adopted an 8-month-old orphan from an orphanage in Yangzhou, China. We then flew to Vietnam a year later and adopted a 5-month-old orphan from an orphanage in Vietnam. And in the meantime, Wolf was offered a position in Vancouver as there was 4 radio stations out there, and they needed somebody that could oversee it all. And so to speed this up a little bit, I'm at my desk one day and he calls me and says, Greenly, he said, I've got a job out here with your name on it. And so I went to my wife at the time, and she said, she was from Brantford, Ontario. And she said, we're pretty comfortable here. And I said, yeah, but life ain't about comfort. So I said, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I'm a little excited. I said, okay, well, I said, have you ever been to Vancouver? She said, no. I said, well, I have. Let's go. So they flew us out, checked out the market. I interviewed for the job, got it. And that was my first management position.
Oh, right on.
Things grew. Yeah, things grew from there. And that was actually the Fraser Valley outside of Vancouver. I lived in Abbotsford for a few years. And I
Okay.
moved from Abbotsford to White Rock because I then I was transferred into Vancouver, and I became the general sales manager at a radio station called News 1130 in Vancouver, who people out there know very, very well. And we were becoming dominant in the market. And then there was a few other changes. I went to another, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So anything
Nice.
tweak your mind you want to ask about?
Yeah. So back to Wolf again for a minute. So you
Sure.
said when
Yeah, absolutely.
you went to Hamilton, he basically went to the guys there and said, "Hey, you need to look at this guy." So
Yes.
how long before that did you know Wolf, and like how
I
did
didn't.
he know to grab you and throw you in there?
Well, I phoned him. I didn't know. I phoned him, and I just explained. I explained who I was, and when you're making a call to anybody, I always say to the salespeople that I've trained, have a VBR, a valid business reason to call. And be prepared. So many people make, especially career calls or a few things, or sales calls, and they're unprepared. You need to be prepared. And if you have the same spiel that 20 other guys do, and I'm sure he'd gotten calls, as did the sales manager. So I called him, and I explained who I was, and I said, the purpose of my call is that I understand you're looking for salespeople. I have about 6 or 7 years sales experience in the radio station, and I also owned a business for 3 years and just closed. I just left that business, and I'd like to re-enter radio. And by the way, I managed 35 or 40 people in my restaurant, plus please feel free to contact my former employer. I was one of the top salespeople, and I'm the easiest guy to manage in the world because I'm low maintenance. I said, I said, just give me an opportunity. I said, you don't have to give me a guarantee. Just give me, you can pay me straight commission right off the bat, which most radio salespeople do. And by the way, I think the whole world should be on commission because if they are, they work twice as hard.
Yep.
And so that's when he went out to his sales manager and said, listen, this guy just gave me a call. I think you should give him a call.
Okay.
So he did. I went in and spoke to the sales manager, and the sales manager and I got along really, really well. And so he hired me. And sometimes, Troy, good things come your way. And people always say, oh, I wish. And so my very first day at CKOC, my very first day, the sales manager came to me and said, Kerry, there's a guy phoned in to ask about advertising. He said, I'm going to come along with you because I'd just like to see it. Now, I hadn't sold for 3 years. I said, okay. So I go down with my sales manager and we meet this guy. And listen, it was more luck than anything. So I talked to the guy and he says, look, I have a sale next week and I really need to promote the sale. What would you suggest? I said, and I knew the basics. I said, well, here's what you need to do. And if you want to be successful, you need to saturate, which means you run about 10 commercials a day. And I said, look, we have a bit of a special on right now, so I can do this and this and this for you. And he said, excellent. He said, where do I sign? I said, well, here, right here. And I said, I said, look, I'll set everything up. And we were there maybe 22 minutes. And because Harry said when we got out there, he says, and he was kind of standing over in the corner, he wasn't really listening. He was looking at, it was just in the guy's store. So I got there, said, well, he said, what's the prognosis? And I said, oh, I got an order for $3,000. And it was in the middle of a recession, and Harry almost had a heart attack. So on the way back to the station, he said, listen, I want you to know we're going to do everything we can to keep you. But Troy, it wasn't that I was great. I was in the right place at the right time. And lots of times sales are there.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't say but, because everything you say but, and if you're watching this, if you hear somebody say but, everything they said before the word but is irrelevant. So what had happened was that if you prepare yourself, then you're in the right place at the right time. Right. But if you never go out, if you never get in front of people, it's never going to happen.
Well, and any time those opportunities are there, you have to open the door, right?
Well, there's another old saying, opportunity comes comes dressed in coveralls and disguised as work.
Right, exactly. Exactly. A lot of times you got to create your own opportunities.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that you hadn't sold for 3 years, so let's just touch on that for 1 second. Sure. So when you bought your bar then, did you get out of radio and your bar was
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was full-time bar, full-time 16 hours a day, no radio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which was a mistake, by the way.
Did you spin records at the bar?
No, owning the bar wasn't a mistake. I learned more in those 3 years than I would have learned in university and anywhere. I learned 10 years experience in 3 years and everybody in Canada should own a business, because when you're the guy or you're the lady
you're the
you're the one cutting the checks, all the responsibilities on you. Boy, you learn a lot and you learn quickly. Yeah. And if you don't learn, you die, because business is unforgiving.
Yeah.
So, in hindsight, once again, this is for anybody watching. When I bought the bar, I didn't know anything about running a restaurant or running a bar. And there was a guy who had been a general manager of another bar in the city, who had a bit of a falling out with the owner. But he really knew his stuff. So I was going to hire him as my manager. And Red Lobster came to him and they could offer him benefits and everything else. So obviously he went there. What I should have done. Are you still there?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, the screen just went dark here. Oh, there. Okay. So what had happened was that I should have went to him and said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 49% of the bar, even though I bought it. I'll give you 49% of it. You run it, and I'll continue to sell radio.
Right. Right. Working partner.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You definitely learn a lot of stuff from business. We owned pizza shops in the past, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's you learn and you learn quickly. Yeah.
You learn very quickly, and you learn that it's if it is to be, it's up to me.
Right. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I have so much respect. I think that's one of the reasons I did so well in sales advertising was because I could identify with business owners. Because you work, you might work 60, 70 hours a week, and at the end of the week or at the end of the 2 weeks, you make payroll, and you hope that, especially when you're getting going, that there's enough left for you, because I didn't take a paycheck for 3 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's
You
that's the
still
reality.
you still want to have your $10 left over once everything's done. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you went to Vancouver because of Wolf. You knew him before
I
he
knew
went to
him.
Vancouver.
Yeah, he never handed me things, but he would give me opportunities. So I went as the general sales manager of the radio stations in the Fraser Valley, which were outside of Vancouver, which was Abbotsford, Chilliwack. And we were doing quite well. And the opening for the general sales manager at News 1130 came up. And Wolf had taught me, if you're good at your job, you never have to apply. And there was a package instead of a trip package that they think they were worth $25,000 or $30,000 each. And these two little radio stations in the valley sold 50% of them.
Oh,
And
nice.
Wolf looked at me, and he looked at the sales manager, and he leaned over to my ear and said, "Give me a call tomorrow." I said, "Okay." And he called me. He said, "I want you to apply for the job as the GSM." And I didn't know if I was ready. And I said, "Okay." And I did. And he went out on a limb, and he hired me. And when and listen, it's all about your sales team. So it's not about when I went into the station. So I went into the station. I knew the vice president of Rogers. And they said, "Look, this station is losing $2.3 million a year, losing every year." And within 5 years, we were making 2.5.
Nice.
So we went from losing to making. And
Nice.
that was back in the early 2000s.
Nice.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah. And once again, that was the sales team that I was lucky enough to put together.
Right. What do you think your favorite part of radio was? Did you like being on air? Did you like doing the news? What's your favorite
My
part?
favorite, well, without a doubt, the favorite part is the people. It really wasn't what I did. It was the people I was able to work with. It was the experience of working with creative people, working with passionate people. When you get into certain lines of work, people are there because they want to be there.
Right.
I can remember when very early on I was working in the oil and gas industry, and there's lots of people that do really well and they love it. I was working at a plant, and there were a percentage, not everybody, but there was a good percentage who they were there because of the money.
Right.
There was no other reason. And in broadcasting, people are there because they want to be there. They you
Right.
you don't have to get up and go to work. You get to go to work. You get to go to work every day, and every day is a new experience. And every day something positive happens. Yes, you have trying days. Yes, there are days when you know you can't get something done, but it is very positive, and I just loved it. Totally loved it. So that was my favorite part of of my of my career. The running a close second to that would be the fact that I had a career where, and once again, this was important to me. It might not be important to somebody watching this. I had the opportunity to travel and see Canada. I had the opportunity to attend major sporting events, to attend concerts, to take clients on excursions to Hawaii, cruises, Arizona, New Orleans, New York, like just all sorts of amazing things that I honestly believe I wouldn't have been able to experience.
Right. Right.
And so just the entire broadcasting industry is just it opens doors, and the passion people have, the care they have about clients. And the third thing I think I really enjoyed, especially when I got into sales, there was nothing I liked better than helping a business. And sometimes, Troy, you would come up with something in your own mind. So I remember a business in Southern Ontario. He was a flooring store, and he said to me, he said, you know, what should we do? And I gave him. I said, look, I said, here's what you need, but you need to really be concerned with what you say inside your commercials. So we came up with, and I don't know if it was a copyright infringement, but I wrote the commercial, and I wrote it Scotty on Star Trek. So I had a guy do the voice, is talking to Jim Kirk, and he's saying, these carpets are threadbare. We need new flooring. And then the other guy said, well, let's go to, this floor store. I think it was Jim's Floor Store or something. And he said, they have the best carpet. They have this deal and this deal and this deal. Well, his business went bang. And about 2 or 3 years later, I had moved on to another market, and I'm driving down Highway 401 in Toronto, and there's outside of Toronto, and there's billboards, and I see a billboard with a picture of the Star Trek Enterprise that
New
says
flooring.
the new flooring, and I looked at that, and Troy, I just thought everything in life, everything we do, like your computer, when you're at work, when you brush your teeth, everything started with somebody's idea.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, that started right in here.
Yeah.
And now there's thousands of people driving by looking at this, and it just
Yeah.
makes you. So that's the kind of reward you get when you're in something that you truly are passionate about and love.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is amazing. You said you got to interview a lot of rock bands and stuff. What would be your favorite rock band that you interviewed?
Oh, favorite rock band. There were many. Um, um, I'm just trying to think. Um, I I was excited about interviewing Van Halen. I was going to interview Eddie Van Halen.
Nice.
Um, and so I had a great conversation. I mean, he would remember me from Adam, but I had a great conversation
Right.
with him. And they actually played Lethbridge, where you're living right now, and I was working for a radio station there, and I went down and they ushered me into the dressing room, and I sat, and David Lee Roth was there, but I think David Lee had been, I don't know what he was doing, but he really wasn't there, but you know, that was one of my favorite about how he did and what he did. So I would have to say that, like, he was one of my favorite, but there were numerous bands that came through whom in different markets that I was able to interview. Um, I'm just trying to think. Like, I remember one of my favorite ones, which was they didn't do too well, but just really down to earth guys. There was a band called Stone Bolt, was really good.
Love Stovall.
I had I had a very quick conversation with Johnny Cash. I didn't really have an interview. That was kind of a real special time. I was working in Kitchener Waterloo, and uh, we had a country station, CKGL, and Johnny Cash had played at Massey Hall and was going to play at a small venue called the Sanderson Center in Brantford. And the reason he was doing it was because New Country had come out. And Johnny, there was a lot of people who were very loyal to Old Country. And so they had said to Johnny, apparently, I guess, they said, there's a lot of people that are out in this area who would love to see you, but they can't make it in. And he said, well, book this. So he came out with June Carter Cash, and there were tickets that were at the radio station, and they said, does anybody want these? I said, oh, who are they for? Johnny Cash. He said, absolutely. So, I scarfed 4 tickets. I think we're in about row 5. And then, because it was with the radio station, we went, and that's how I found out why he came. Because I said, wow, I said, this is a small venue. And, he basically, he said, well, he said, I've got a special place in my heart for Canada. He said, a little town up the road called London, Ontario is where I proposed to June. And I don't know if you know that.
Okay.
And we just chatted. So it wasn't an interview, but that was a great conversation.
Nice. Yeah, you mentioned Stovall. That was one of my favorite bands when I was younger. They played in Fort McMurray at one of the pubs, the bars there.
Yeah.
And I went every night that they were there.
Yeah.
I actually did their lights for them one time. The light guy got to sing a song. So I did their lights for them. That's my claim to fame.
Oh, great. Yeah, they never made it that big, but they were just very decent, humble human beings. I really enjoyed them.
So you think those would be your most down-to-earth people that you've met through that?
Yeah, well, I think, I'll tell you the 2 or 3 of the most down-to-earth people I met were Lloyd Moseby from the Toronto Blue Jays, and there were 2 or 3 others, and what that played for the Jays. And what had happened was the Blue Jays did a caravan around Southern Ontario, to begin the season. And so my client was a big sports bar, so they would come to his sports bar, and then we'd invite clients down. So I sat down, and the 2 guys that really stood out, one was a broadcaster by the name of Tom Cheek, who's no longer with us, and he was just a tremendous broadcaster and did broadcasting for the Blue Jay games, right across the country. And Lloyd Moseby, and I believe Jesse Barfield was along. Now these are all-time Jays. Oh, and I think Alex Fernandez, not Tony Fernandez, Alex. I can't remember what his last name was, but he was very young, and they just put him into shortstop. And so, just really good guys, really,
Nice.
really good, down to earth guys. and some of the managers I spoke to, hockey general managers. Oh, I will tell you this one quick story. So my former, talking about people I've run into, my former sales manager was a gentleman by the name of Mike Blake, prince of a guy, who had a cup of coffee with the Los Angeles Kings. He was Toe Blake's nephew. And so he he went to Ohio State. The Kings had drafted him, but it just didn't last. When you get to that high, I mean, he was good, great sales manager. Anyway, he got to know Marcel Dion pretty well.
Nice.
So there was a big alumni game in Kitchener Waterloo to raise some money, and so a lot of the former National Hockey League players were coming in to play in this game. So unbeknownst to me, Marcel wants to come up to see his old buddy Blakey. Troy, no word of a lie, and if you're older, people understand this. So I walk out from the back because I'm going to go on a sales call, and I walk into the foyer where our receptionist was, and standing in the foyer was Bobby Hull, Marcel Dion, Guy Lafleur, and Daryl Sittler.
Nice.
And I just was,
all the
and
big guys.
This is in the days before cell phones, and my jaw's just on the floor because otherwise I would have had a picture right. And Bobby comes over and says, "Bobby Hull," and he, like, his hand engulfs mine, and I started chatting with them all, and that was awesome.
That's amazing.
One of the other people that I really had a great conversation with, there was two. Gordie Howe, I met on 2 or 3 separate occasions, because when I was in Vancouver, there was a tournament in Abbotsford, a Bantam tournament, and they called it Mr. Hockey, and Gordie Howe would come out for that tournament. And because I was involved with the station, and we were a sponsor, I got to sit down and chat with him.
Nice.
So I talked to him, and then we had a big golf tournament. And at the golf tournament were some old fellas. There was Andy Bathgate, and these are probably people might not know. Anyway, so Andy Bathgate, who's no longer with us. So I see Andy, and I go over and I said, Andy, I said, I have to tell you this quick story. I said, I was a Leaf fan, and my stepdad used to like to needle me. So I'm maybe 7 or 8, 9 years old. And he said to me, and Bathgate used to play for the Rangers. And he said, "The Rangers are going to kill the Leafs tonight." He said, "You wait, we'll watch the hockey game together." And in those days, you only got to see the last 2 periods. And so we sit down. He said, "Yeah, Bathgate, he's the highest scorer in the league." And that day, Bunch Imlach had traded a bunch of players for Andy Bathgate. And he suited up for the Leafs. And of course, the Leafs won the game, and he scored a couple of goals. And then he went in and he said, "Oh, I remember that day." And he talked to me about it. Like, it's just really cool to be able to meet some of those guys. Of course, there's a lot of modern players that I met too, like guys I ran into, like Messier. My bar was a stone's throw away from where Wayne Gretzky grew up. So,
Nice.
Walter would pop into the bar every once in a while, and he and his wife for something to eat, and things like that. So
Nice. I went to hockey school with Mark Messier. I went to Doug
oh
Messier's hockey school. Just
oh
out
yeah
Edmonton there. Yeah. That was another one of my brushes with fame. I think he was 1 or 2 years ahead of me, though. But yeah, we were all in there together. That was pretty cool. So you met a lot of people. You said you went on some
absolutely.
trips and stuff with your clients.
Yes.
What were your favorite places you visited around the world?
Well, we went. I love Costa Rica. I love Panama. I had a couple of years ago, we had planned to go to Europe. We never took clients to Europe because that was like we always tried to stay within about a 4 or 5 hour plane ride. So Europe, but my good friend is going to retire in the UK in a couple of years. So he said, Kerry, please wait and then come over and spend 6 months and we'll do it right. I said, oh, perfect. Okay, I'm all about that. So favorite places, I really loved Maui, obviously.
Nice.
Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo, Mexico. I love the Mexican Riviera, and it's close. But on the other side of Mexico, I really enjoyed. I went there a couple of times, and I took my kids there when they were young. Ixtapa, Tamarindo, Costa Rica. You know, the west end of Panama. I really enjoy. There was there were places that we went. Numerous cities, like Los Angeles, I enjoyed. Tampa Bay, if you haven't been there, is awesome. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, very much enjoyed that. Really enjoyed Saint Martin, which is in the Caribbean, or Caribbean, as you're supposed to call it. So just a number of places. I don't know if I actually had a favorite, because every one of them, I totally enjoyed. And the best thing about going is we would go in February or March. So, regardless of where you were in Canada, except when I was in Vancouver, but it was cold and rainy there, there'd be snow on the ground. You'd get on a plane and, you'd get off and, you'd spend a week, in a beautiful
Sunshine and flip
resort.
flops.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
awesome. So let's touch a little bit on your personal life. You mentioned,
sure.
so you've been married 3 times.
Yes.
When you adopted your children,
Yeah.
that was with your second wife?
I was with my second wife, and how that came about was, and once again, people talk about life experiences, so we'll share. So we were in Southern Ontario. We found out that she was having problems conceiving. So we then went through the in vitro fertilization program about 3 times, cost a pile of money, and didn't work. And of course, technology's come a long way since then. But um, and so, I mean, I'm 40 years old by this time, and she was 5 years younger than me. And I'm saying, look, I don't want to be 65 with a teenager, which happened. But anyway, um, um, and so we looked at domestic adoption, and in Ontario there was absolutely 0 kids. There were no children to adopt. Like there were. So unless you knew somebody, and then I tried the private adoption, that didn't work. And then I said to her, look, you've got kind of 12 months, because like we have to have a bit of a timeline on this. And so then she started looking into international adoptions. And she came to me and said, look, she said, we can go to Russia, we can go to Belize, we can go to Romania, we can go to China. And I said, well, give me the details. And with China, you were dealing with the government. Everything else was private. And so I thought, well, if you're dealing with the government, I think that's the safest route. So at the same time, there was an article in Maclean's magazine about a lady who had gone to China from Ottawa. And she, so my client was, we were just chatting, and my client was asking me, about, do I have any kids, and I just shared a little bit, not too much. So he went and got this article. I gave him the magazine. I took it home, showed it to my wife. She phoned. I came home the next day and she said, there's a meeting this Saturday in Ottawa. Could we go? And it was called the Children's Bridge. So I said, okay. So it was about a 4 or 5 hour drive from Kitchener-Waterloo, where we lived. So we get to, we go there, and we're checking the hotel and everything, and the meeting was in a church basement, Troy. So we get there, and there's about 20 other people. And one of the guys who I'm still friends with, his name was Perry, and he was a retired Toronto cop. He was 58. Why he wanted to have a kid there, I don't know. Anyway, so Perry's about 6'6", big guy. So Perry's there, and I'm a little skeptical. And so this woman walks in. Her name is Linda. I can't remember what her last name was. And she walks in and she says, and understand that people who have been through infertility, you're on your own. Nobody cares. It's very difficult. And she walks in, and here's couples. Many of the females have been trying to have kids for 5, some of them for 15 years. And she said, if you sign and give us a deposit today, in 9 months, you will have a baby girl. And then she brings in her Chinese daughter, who is about 5 or 6 by then. Of course, everybody's crying, like,
Right.
and I'm looking around thinking, this is a scam. And so I look over at Perry, whom I don't know anybody in the room, and I'm looking at all these guys, with tears in their eyes, and I'm thinking, oh, have you people never, what is this? And I look at Perry, and I kind of look at him, catch his eye, and I shake my head. He looks at me, and he kind of rolls his eyes. So my wife says, well, I think we should try this. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't want a bit, I want a nice ride back to Kitchener's, though. It's worth $500. So I wrote a check for $500, thinking, okay, there's an hour out of my life and $500 to never get back. And so she gives it to her. Well, to speed things up, Troy, 8.5 months later, we're on a plane, Toronto to Vancouver, Vancouver to Beijing, and everything's in place. Like there was paperwork, there was dossiers, there was everything, and you had to deal with the Children's Aid Society, which handled adoptions in Ontario, and you had to deal with the Chinese government. And then they said, I can remember them saying, okay, you need to make a donation of, I think it was about $3,000 US to the orphanage. It cost about $25K all told at that time. And, and by the way, the director of the orphanage, it's nice, like the Chinese, to present a gift. So we say, hey, let's take a bottle of Crown Royal. I bet you the guy loved that. And he loved us. Anyway, so that's what happened. And so we flew to China, and of course it was awesome, and when I was there, we had, whenever you get a group of people traveling, I didn't care if they said, watch what you eat because you'll get sick. I didn't care. I was going to experience the culture. So I ate everything. And a doctor had said to me, the purest thing you can drink when you're in another country is beer, because it's pasteurized. So the Chinese beer is really good, and it's light. So I drank beer with every meal, including breakfast. And I just had a great time. And when people would ask me, they'd say, "Oh, Kerry, what's that?" And I knew if I said chicken, or if I said beef, they'd eat it all. So I'd say fish. Everything I ate was, so they wouldn't eat it anyway. So we stayed. They then took us from Beijing. They flew us to Nanjing. And if anybody has ever seen the John Wayne movie, The Flying Tigers, about the city of Nanking, well, it's renamed Nanjing. That was the city that was based in. And then it was a 2-hour drive about halfway to Shanghai, a city about 400,000 people, called Yangzhou. And that's where the orphanage was.
Nice.
So we were staying in a hotel, which was quite luxurious by Chinese standards at that time. And this is about 1997, I think, 1996. 1996. And I'm walking, and the Toronto Store actually did a story. They weren't, we weren't expecting the babies for another 2 or 3 hours. And I'm walking down the halls in front of there was 10 couples all staying on one floor, on the 10th floor. And the elevator opens, and there's 5 to 10 5 in each elevator. There's 10 nannies get off, and each one of them holding a little girl.
Huh.
And you're sent a picture beforehand, and you're told don't fall in love with the picture at that time because your baby may not be alive when you get there.
Right.
And they try to match everything up. Anyway, the Chinese were excellent people. Everything went really smooth, and they and our daughter, who's 25 now, I guess she had a bit of a cold, so they'd given her a bunch of codeine. So she's very calm and everything. I'm thinking, wow, this is great. Well, when the codeine wears off, she starts to wail, and then she's hungry. So my wife at the time was, I had 4 brothers and sisters, and you would know this, as did you. And so we had to look after them when they were little because I was the second oldest. So she said, I don't know why she's crying. She said she won't, like, I've tried to feed her and she just spits it out. And I said, well, here, give me the bottle. And then so I go like this because I said, this is cold. She said, well, the book says room temperature. I said, don't listen to the book. Listen to somebody that's been there. I said, my mom. So I put it in the microwave and I heat it up a bit. Boom, takes it, goes down. So we came back with her, and neither one of us really wanted a single child, but I wasn't sure, and so the ladies at Canada Trust call me and they say, "Oh, Mr. Greenly, your loan is ready." I said, "What loan?" "Well, your wife mentioned that maybe Kira, that's my daughter's name, would need a sibling, so we thought we'd help." So, oh, great, Anyway, so I went in and so the Toronto Star had done a story on us, and it had gone across the country, and so we were helping other people adopt because nobody knew how to do this. This was right on the ground floor. And there were so many, and China was only about 6 or 8 months away, but after our story came out, adoptions went from 8 months to 2 years.
Really?
And there was just a huge influx, especially from Ontario. So we were looking at going again, and they said, well, because of your notoriety and who you are, we could maybe get you in faster, unless you wanted to go to Vietnam. Now, I've already told you, and people watching this, I'm a little adventurous. I said, well, we've already been to China.
Right.
So they said, Vietnam's starting to open up. So then we contacted an organization in Montreal called Terre des Hommes, which means friend of man. And they're an aid organization, but they also did some adoptions. So we went to Montreal, stayed overnight, went in and met them. And they said, well, would you like a boy or a girl? And in China, you can only adopt girls.
Right.
And I said, oh, we have a choice? I said, well, sure, a boy would be fine. I said, great, you've just been moved up 6 months because most people don't want to adopt boys like you and I, Troy, because we're trouble.
I don't know what you're talking.
8.5 months later, we once again, lots of dossiers, lots of paperwork, and we had to pay people. So 8.5 months later, we were on an airplane, and we flew from Toronto to Anchorage to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong to Saigon.
Nice.
And then we were in Vietnam for 2 weeks, and it was kind of interesting. Once again, we weren't supposed to get the babies for another 2 days. And what they did was, the government was a little more buttoned down in Vietnam. Even though we were dealing through the government, they were always concerned about attracting attention. So the babies were put on, they put the babies on the backs of motorcycles, but they all took different routes to the hotel, and they showed up early. But let me just back up for one second. So my son, the story is he was born up near the North Vietnamese border. Now they told us he was born in a place called Tay Ninh, which is right on the Cambodian border. And my son, the story that we got, which was unofficial, that he was born out of wedlock, left with some Catholic nuns at a nunnery. It was in a province that they didn't allow their babies to leave, anybody to leave. So he was smuggled out and smuggled into this orphanage. And what Terre des Hommes did was every group, and our group was no different, every group, if they could, they put a doctor with who was adopting. And so there was a doctor in the former group who went in, and he was in an orphanage in Tay Ninh. And the doctor looked at him, and he was tiny, Troy, like he was really tiny. And the doctor said, if you don't get this kid into Saigon, because the difference in care in the rural regions is unbelievable in
Right.
those countries. And so they charged us an extra $100 US, which was nothing, and took him in. And there was a nanny there, and she didn't leave him. He didn't leave her hip for 3 months, and she nursed him, and he was healthy when we got him, very tiny but healthy. So anyway, so they put them all on the back on these motorcycles, and they bring them. There's 3 babies. There's only 3. Excuse me. And they bring them from different routes, and then they call us. They say, "Can you come down to room 322?" We go down there, and there's the 3 babies, and that's when the handover came.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of tears and everything, and it was really difficult because this nanny had become very attached to my son Quinn, who's 23 now, and so everything's good, and we take him upstairs, and immediately, like, because he'd been spoken Vietnamese too, he was only 5 months old, but you get used to things. Well, we smelled different, we sounded different. He was in a strange place. And I tell him, and he just laughs. I said, "You were the most high maintenance guy on the planet." And so he well, everything went well, and we we had to stay later than the group because there was something wrong with the Ontario government's paperwork, and we had to get this piece of paper to be able to legally get him out of the country. And the longest flight I've ever had, Troy, was from Hong Kong to Toronto, 15 and a half hours, and the plane was packed. And I had a wailing baby on my lap for 9 of those hours. So that was very cool. So yeah, we really enjoyed that. And then there was one other experience that I'll quickly share, was that there was a young boy. His name was Kien, K-I-E-N. And Terre des Hommes contacted me, and his father had lost an arm in the Vietnam War. And so Kien was about 6 or 7 years old. They lived in the rural area, and were very, very poor. And he would make, he cut hair with his one arm, and he made about 6 dong a month. So that might be $3 a month. Like, and this kid really wanted to go to school, but nobody had any money, and so they couldn't give him a book. So what he would do was he would find old pieces of paper, and he would copy out in pencil the textbook and read it so he could learn. So Teradazom came to me and they said, look, Kerry, we need somebody to sponsor this kid. And listen, I'm not saying this because I'm a great guy or anything. Anybody would have done this. Anybody. And I said, they said, well, how much, and I said, well, how much is it? He said, well, it's 25 US a month. And I said, well, how about I give you 50 and you can make sure that there's food for him and his family.
Nice.
And they said, well, if we get more than that, we like to include another kid. I said, you can do this. But I said, if everybody does a little part, and this I knew, you have all these organizations that say, here, you'll sponsor this kid. But, you have no clue what's going to administration. I knew these people intimately.
Right.
And I was dealing with the executive director. And I said, look, just let me do this. And she said, okay. Anyway, he's an engineer now.
Nice. You keep contact with him?
No, not really. He sent, they didn't, like he sent us a thank you letter, but he was kind of on his own. And Teradazom wanted to make sure that we didn't, like he didn't feel that he owed anybody anything.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they're very humble people anyway. So he, they felt it. So he sent a beautiful thank you letter. And, after that, listen, all I wanted out of the whole thing was you be the best you can be.
Right.
And,
yeah.
That's awesome. So, and both of my kids are, my daughter's 25 years old now. She, typical young lady, dad doesn't know anything. It doesn't matter where you start. And she is in her final year. It took her a while to figure things out, but she has now. So she's in her final semester of getting her teaching degree. She has her Bachelor of Arts and getting her teaching degree. And she's actually been interviewing internationally for some teaching positions because, with the economy here in Alberta and with COVID, things are difficult. So she's always volunteered and has has coaching certificates. So she had an interview with a school in Casablanca in Morocco. And I said, oh, that's awesome. In Hong Kong and in the United Kingdom and in Qatar. So I said to her, I said, when you're young, now's the time to do this kind of thing. Like. So, and my son is 23 and he graduated in 2020 also. And he is just looking to article for his accounting designation. And then we'll see what he does from there. So, I just share that because I think, people talk about these big, massive programs that people can do. And you know what? Find out how you can help. And I didn't do this to help. I did this to be selfish. I wanted to be a father. But and then do something to make a difference in somebody's life. As I used to say to the girls and the young boys when I coached them, in hockey and in soccer, if you do all the little things right, the big things will happen automatically.
Right.
Anyway.
So growing up and playing sports, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned from your coaches?
I would have to say that it's that the first thing, one of the first things was, and I see this when I see people who are like sports and they say, I hate this team or I hate that team. I think one of the first things I learned that really stuck with me was respect your opponent. Because if you're playing sports, if you don't have an opponent, there's no game.
Right.
So respect your opponent. And, when somebody loses, like, I don't know when people will be watching this, but a couple of nights ago, Team Canada Juniors lost to the USA. And, both teams left everything out there they had. And they're 16 to 19-year-old kids. they went out and experienced. And I think one of the biggest things I learned about when you go out and you compete, you do your best, and you're not going to win every game. And it's the same in life. You're not going to win all the time. But if you lose, you don't beat yourself up. You say, okay, what could I have done better here? What could I have done better there? And maybe you did the best you could. Maybe you just wound up against somebody that was better than you. And that's another great lesson in life, no matter how tough you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how good you think you are, there's always somebody that's done better. And that's not to take anything away from you.
Right. But those are the learning experiences too. You learn from that and make yourself better.
Put
Like you said,
yourself out there.
what could I
Absolutely.
change? Right.
Well, and like get in the game. Get out there and compete. Get in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What was so through all your radio career, your personal life and your family, what do you think was your most memorable learning lesson through your life?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's a real hard question. I don't think there was just one. Um, there's the old saying that when you're 20 years old, you have all the answers. When you're 50 years old, you realize you don't have any of the answers. So I think probably the greatest lesson somebody can have is I'm just waving to my neighbor walking by there. The greatest lesson anybody can have is that just constantly learn, lifelong learning. So if there's one lesson, it's that nobody has it all figured out. Nobody. And I would have to say just like life goes by so fast. Just experience all you can.
Nice.
There's tons of them. And like if you keep moving, like if you sit there and you think about something, and you think about it, you take action.
Right.
You never, you never. You never get anything done unless you take action. And by the
Right.
way, a lot of us, most of us, many of us have limiting beliefs. And they say, "Oh, I can't do that." There's that little voice in your head, "Oh, I can't do that." Well, the way to defeat limiting belief is through confidence, and the way to gain confidence is to take action. If you
Right.
take action and do things, that gains confidence. Confidence defeats limiting beliefs.
Nice.
So
It's
look,
right on.
having all these things I say, and somebody's watching, I have made every mistake you can make,
Yeah.
and like I say, and I know you were talking about marriages. Listen, I've been very fortunate. I was 60 years old. I had gone through an extremely messy divorce. Cost me a ton of money, and I was not going to get married again. And I was very fortunate that I wasn't looking. I met an amazing woman
Nice.
who we decided to get married. And I always say to her, it took me 60 years to find you. Took me 60 years to learn. You can be assured that this is it.
Well, sometimes the right one just comes along, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes they come along when you're 25, and sometimes they come along when you're 65.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Um, Earlier on, you mentioned, so you had your bar and you mentioned that you owned 3 businesses. So what were your other ventures?
Um, I owned when I first got into radio. Of course, they were, you made starvation wages because there's 20 kids wanted the job you got, so, um, and so in order to supplement my income, I bought this is when disco was big. So I bought a dance machine from one of the other DJs who wanted out, called the 1090 Check, Keep on Dancing Disco. And so we treated that like a business. And it was lucrative. It was lucrative, Troy.
Nice.
What I can remember, and this is back in the late 70s. So once again, this is in Lethbridge. So I don't even know if it's there now, but I would rent the exhibition pavilion in Lethbridge. I would get free. I would get free advertising because there was no promotion department at the radio station. So what I would do is I'd say, "Oh, this is a big 1090 Check promotion. You guys don't worry about it. Just let me run advertising." And I would run a 60-second commercial every hour from 6 to midnight. Well, that's when all the young kids were listening.
Right.
Then I would offer every announcer at the radio station $50 cash, which was a lot of money to them, if they would come down and do a half-hour stint on stage. And then we would put on this big dance with all of the radio announcers. And of course, and I would charge $3 to get in. And it used to cost me about $1,000 to rent the exhibition pavilion. And it was a lot of money in those days, $1,000 to rent. Another couple $100 for security. And so all told, it might cost me $1,400 or $1,500. I'd sell 12 to 1,500 tickets.
Nice.
I'd stick $3,000 in my jeans and walk away. Like, how good was that?
Right.
So anyway, so that was what that was a great business. I moved on from that.
How long did you do that one for?
I did that for about 3 years.
Nice.
And and then it was time to, like I said, then I left Lethbridge and went east.
Was it like a monthly thing, or did you do it like every week,
no,
every weekend?
Well, we did. Well, that was just, school dances. We would do weddings.
Okay.
We would, and we charged way more than anybody else did. But that's because, I mean, I was a personality on the air. The guys that were helping me worked at the radio station who needed money, so I would pay them cash, and my wife at the time worked in a bank, so she kept all the books. So like we did, it was lucrative. We did,
Nice.
like, we were busy pretty well every weekend, like
Nice.
Friday and Saturday nights. I had a partner at the time, and that's where I learned that a partnership is the hardest ship to sail.
Right. Yep.
So anybody watching, remember that. And so then after that, like I had bought the bar. And then when I was out in British Columbia, there was a guy that I knew who had a number of payroll loans. And I didn't really like the business, but he talked me into buying a franchise. And I went to a guy who had been kicked out by the banks and said, "Look, you run this, and in 2 or 3 years, I'll just sell it to you, and it'll be yours." And I did that for a short while. But I just didn't, I got out of it pretty quickly because it just didn't sit right with me. It wasn't what you made money, but it wasn't the kind of business I wanted to be in. So
Right.
I got rid of that. I took a bit of a loss to get out of it, just because even though it was making money, it just wasn't I didn't want to be associated with it.
Right. Definitely, there's things in your life that go against your morals, go against your.
Absolutely. Yep. And and I didn't realize at the time when I got into it exactly, and then I looked at this and I said, you know what, this is, to me, I was taking advantage of people, and so I actually closed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. If you could go back and change one thing through your life, what would it be?
Another excellent question. Um, I've thoroughly enjoyed everything. Um, it would probably. I don't think there's any one thing. Once again, um, it would probably be that uh, the one thing I think I would really change is that I would listen. There were situations, especially when I was in management, that I would listen more and make sure I had all the facts and information before I made a decision that had an effect on people's lives. That's
Okay.
the one thing I would say. Just make sure that you have all your facts right. Before reacting to a situation,
Right.
because sometimes, and we've all done that. Something will happen, and you look back and say, I would read, what was I thinking? Or I think I would have handled that a little differently.
Right.
So that's probably the big thing.
Okay. So a couple little random questions before we go.
Sure.
Um, Picture yourself in a field, big meadow, a door in
Okay.
front of you.
Yep.
What's on the other side of your door?
At this point in my life, is that what the question is? I don't
That's
really
up to
understand it.
you. However you want to perceive it. If you were
Okay.
standing out there looking at this door, what would
Yep.
be on the other side of your door?
I really don't know. Um, it could be more of the same. I would say more adventure and more experience, and I would definitely walk through the door. There,
Nice.
there would be there would be more experiences. There would be more adventure, and I would, my whole point would be, keep moving. Like athletes say, you always want to be leaning forward, because if you lean backwards, then the people behind you catch up. You want to be
Right.
leaning forward.
Yeah. Right on. Right on.
Oh, I just lost your voice. I just lost your voice, Troy. Um, can't hear you, my friend. Can't hear you. Just 1 second. I don't know why. Is it you or is it me? We'll have to edit this. Um, uh,
Oh, there you are. Are you back? I heard you there for a second.
there. Now I can hear you again.
Okay, there we are. A little bit of
Sorry.
glitch. Technology.
Yeah.
If you were stuck on a desert island all by
Right.
yourself, you had a
Yes.
device with you, but it could only play one song over and over. So being in the radio career, you would know a lot about that. What would be your one
Yeah.
song that it would play?
Oh, probably "Twisting the Night Away" by Rod Stewart. It's an old Sam Cooke tune.
Nice.
And by the way, for people watching this, or even for yourself, um, Sam Cooke had such an influence on Rod Stewart, the Rolling Stones. I believe he had an influence on the Beatles. He was such a tremendously talented guy, and unfortunately, back in the 50s, there were so many black guys who just weren't, they didn't get their due because of
Right.
the way people thought back then. But there's so many of them who are just so talented, like so I think like he wrote "You Send Me." He wrote "Bring It On Home." I don't know if any of those are familiar to you. He wrote "Twisting the Night Away." You know, I think he wrote
Nice.
"Saturday Night." You know, just songs that other guys have done covers for. They're just incredible.
Nice.
So that
Awesome.
would be the song, "Twisting the Night Away," just because it lifts me up. Like if I'm, sometimes you're blah, you know,
Right.
I'll just go on YouTube and I'll just click it on. It's the theme song to Inner Space, the movie Inner Space with
Nice.
Dennis Quaid.
Nice.
It's just a great tune.
Right on. If you could write a letter to your younger self, what age would it be and what would you say to yourself?
Um, uh, well, I think I probably started to figure things out when I was 20 years old. So I would write a letter to myself when I was 20, and the letter would say, everything you want to do, you're going to be able to do. Everything that you're thinking about right now, you're going to touch.
Nice.
So don't worry. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't be insecure. Don't let what anybody says about you define you. Just be in the moment.
Nice.
Experience. Because what a lot of us do, Troy, is we numb ourselves. And we numb ourselves because we're in a situation that might be difficult. So we get through it by dropping into a little zone inside of our heads until it's done,
Right.
rather than to say, I'm going to experience this. This might be uncomfortable, but I'm going to experience this. And
Nice.
and I'd end it by saying, look, think things through, but don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
Like, if you make a mistake, move on.
Right.
And I'll leave you with the thought. I said to my kids, the mark of a truly successful human being is the person who gets up and keeps moving. Because no matter who you are in life, something's going to come out of left field and it's going to knock you right down. And you're not going to be expecting it, regardless of what it is: death, divorce, financial problems, whatever it is. Sometime in life, that's going to happen. No matter how well you think you're doing, it's going to happen. And the mark is somebody who stands up and says, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to take time to grieve. I'm going to, job loss or whatever. I'm going to take time to understand. I'm going to take time, but I'm not going to curl up in a ball and feel sorry for myself. I'm
Right.
going to keep moving.
Right. Nice. Okay. Final question. Um, Thanks for the interview, by the way. It's been great talking with you, and you've shared a
My
lot of
pleasure.
great insight into your life and stuff. So, final question: if Kerry Greenly makes it through his whole life, learns everything he's ever wanted to, accomplished everything, had tons of experiences, but when he passes on, nothing of his memory is left behind here except for 3 lessons for life. What would those 3 things you would leave for future generations be?
Well, the first thing is what I just talked about. When you get knocked down, get up and keep going, no matter what it is. So that would be lesson number one. I think lesson number two would be enjoy the moment. Be in the moment. Don't don't think about, and I'm sure you've heard this. There's that little vignette about the station where people are so concerned about getting to their destination. The destination is the journey.
Right.
So
Right.
enjoy the journey. Enjoy, be in the moment. Don't think about the future. For God's sakes, don't reminisce about the past and about your mistakes, because you can't change it. It doesn't do anything.
Nice.
So, and what's the old what's the stat? 85% of all worry is useless because it never happens anyway. So the second thing would be in the moment. And the third would be commit to lifelong learning. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to go to school every day. Just commit to lifelong learning. Like if you see something, and you're there, try to learn from it, and there's times where, like, that doesn't mean you're constantly, I got to learn from this. It's just, like when you go to bed at night, first of all, think about 3 things you're grateful for.
Nice.
Right? Because people are grateful enough for what we do have. And then think, well, okay, what did I learn today? What did I experience today that I can take away?
Nice.
So I would say the third lesson would be commit to lifelong learning.
That's
and
awesome.
Read a book a month, buddy. Read a book a month.
I was going to bring that up. So that would be part of your lifelong learning. Everything you read.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I know that many years ago they did a study. The professors at Harvard University, the smartest university in the land, did a study and asked graduates how many books they'd read since, and this was like 20 years after. These are the smartest people in the land, and the average that a person had read was only 3 books.
Really, that's crazy.
So but you'll be shocked at how many people don't. You'll be shocked at how many people don't do some form of exercise. No, I get that some people can't. Totally understand that. But there's always something you can do. But, like a book a month might be 10 minutes a day, if that.
Right.
So if you don't like to read and you just say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to read this and I'm going to absorb it. So lots of times we read and we don't absorb. So go back and read it again.
Yeah.
And we have so much available to us now. There's podcasts, there's audiobooks, there's all kinds of things. I was telling you about different podcasts I listen, and they're just, they're excellent. And you pick up ideas from them and you say, oh, I'll adapt that. There's a good idea.
Right. That's what I keep looking at, is all the little things out there that I can use in my life. And
absolutely.
That's
there's, you're totally right. There's the old, not old, but there's that saying is, as I was taught, and then I passed on because I got it from somebody else. If you do all the little things right and you're consistent, like, you're not going to see anything tomorrow. I used to tell people in advertising, listen, advertising is like going to the gym and working out. If you go to the gym and work out once, you're going to be achy, you're going to be sore, and you're going to be unhappy. Mm-hmm. And if you never go back, you've wasted your time. So I would say to guys, if you're going to advertise for a week, save your money. Don't even talk to me. But if you go to the gym every day and you commit for a year, I'm not saying advertise for you, but you commit. In 3.5 months, you're going to say, wow, I feel better. I look better. Wow, this is pretty cool. But it takes self-discipline. And you got to conquer that little voice in your head that says, you know what, Troy, don't exercise today. It's okay to skip. Today. I don't feel like it. You know what? Just, pour yourself a beer and sit on the couch and, and watch a movie.
Right.
So those are, like, if you do the little things. So if you did, and when we get back to, to reading, if you read a book a month, do you think you know more in 12 months than you do today?
Right.
Do you think you might be a little smarter?
Exactly.
Handle situations better.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. No, those are great lessons to live by, for sure. It's been a pleasure having you on, Kerry. I enjoy chatting with you. We'll get together and chat again. Thanks again. And I hope that people watching got some insight from this, and maybe we can chat again, later on. And
absolutely. My pleasure.
Maybe
I've enjoyed it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That'll be
Need to
awesome.
interview you one of these days. So
There you
that's
go.
great.
There you go. Do a reverse
All right.
interview. Yeah. Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. And
You're
thanks for
welcome.
joining us, people. This has been Lessons for Life podcast. Join us again for another episode. Thank you.